Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show. Mark Sanford wins in South Carolina. Congratulations to Governor Sanford. He's now returned to the House of Representatives, where he started his political career after years of wandering in the wilderness. Now we turn to Washington itself, because there is nothing but unhappiness tomorrow. The Benghazi hearings beginning on the Hill. The House of Representatives will hear from three men, all of whom have been identified in the news. They're identified as whistleblowers. What does that mean? That means that they work at the State Department. And over these last weeks and months, since the 2012, September 11th, 2012 Benghazi tragedy, these men have wanted to tell their story to the American people and to the Congress. They will get that opportunity tomorrow. What we will learn will be surprising, given that the President of the United States, the then Secretary of Defense, the then Secretary of State, the then Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, all told the American people a story that is no longer accurate. No one pretends that it's accurate. That a video insulting Islam was the predicate for a demonstration at the annex at Benghazi or at the residence at Benghazi. That was a fiction. We set that aside. We'll learn more of the facts tomorrow from the State Department. There is another element here. It is also the CIA. They know a lot. Victor Davis Hanson of the Hoover Institution joins me tonight because he has a piece up on NRO. And this is an historical reference. Is Benghazi, is it Watergate? Is it Iran-Contra? Is it worse? Is it all of the above? Victor, a very good evening to you. Watergate was a scandal that brought down a president. Iran-Contra was a scandal that rocked a president. What scale do you see Benghazi right now with a re-elected, twice elected president of the United States and a new team, state, defense, DCI? Good evening to you.
They happened in the second term, and I think it's because of presidential laxity, but somewhere in between, because we have elements of both. We have this poor man, not poor, I mean, he's not a sympathetic figure, but the video maker, Nakula, is now in jail, and his probation was revoked on a narrative that Obama and Hillary Clinton and almost Susan Rice and everybody used him as sort of a caricatured reactionary far-right Islamophobe that they could beat up on and show the Islamic world. They put him in jail to win grace or forgiveness from the Islamic world. And he's a U.S. citizen, so he had some due process issues right there. And then with Iran-Contra, we never really knew what was going on with the arms for hostages and the labyrinth of private deals. And we still don't know exactly why we had the consulate in Benghazi when every other country had shut theirs down. We don't know quite what the CIA annex was doing. We hear stories about rounding up weapons, putting them on Turkish freighters, sending them to somebody in Syria. But all of that it's been very quiet. And even the critics of the thing don't really want to get into there. And then, of course, we have with Watergate, the administration pressured the intelligence to cook their assessments and say, this is national security, stay out. But this is a little different. The intelligence gave them accurate assessments, and then they cooked it themselves, which I mean, that's even more flagrant because there's a paper trail there. There's no Watergate thing that says, well, you know, they made us do this. They gave an accurate assessment, and then they just have two sets of books. They've got the intelligence assessment, and then they've got their redacted assessment that is the one that went public. And then when we still don't know all of the details of why exactly Panetta left and why exactly Hillary left and why Petraeus left, but that's very odd, too, that the principals involved are gone.
Victor, I want to make this connection because your column triggered it in my own mind. Watergate, we remember, stained the Republican Party and everybody who was involved in it for several cycles afterwards. And so did Iran-Contra. You recall, though,
yes,
Mr. Bush won the '88 election over over the Democrats. He was still accused of having been involved in Iran-Contra. Do you think that's a possibility here, that all of these, Mrs. Clinton, we know, is not left the political theater. She will be back inside the theater. Mr. Panetta is a senior, is a graybeard of the Democratic Party. Do you believe that they will be stained by what we learn tomorrow?
Well, I think the key issue is, because unlike Iran-Contra and unlike Watergate, 4 people are dead. And if the testimony comes out that at least 2 of them could have been saved had the people who wanted to save them been allowed to go, and that B, they were not allowed to go, not because it wasn't feasible or it wasn't logical or it wasn't rational, but because it upset a narrative that this was not going to be a Mogadishu-like shootout right before the election. If that happens to be a narrative that comes out of the hearings tomorrow, I think it will. It'll really damage the Obama administration, because it also, there is a weird emphasis here with the Boston explosions, with the Boston killings, with Major Hassan, that every single time an issue of national security comes up, this administration errs on the side of not trying to offend the Muslim world, whether it's jailing a Coptic filmmaker or not going after Tsarnaev when we know that he's on a watch list, or calling Major Hassan workplace violence and worrying about the diversity program. So there's a narrative here, and at some point people are going to get angry. Maybe not isolated, but in aggregate, each one of these builds on the other.
Mr. Obama, he's strangely absent from all the dark words that are being thrown around right now. His cabinet is certainly part of the debate, Mrs. Clinton, Mr. Panetta, and that is important, but the president is not. Is that a judgment on him that he was not in charge of whatever happened at Benghazi? Well,
the proverbial story is that he just went to bed because he had a campaign appearance the next day in Las Vegas, which in his hierarchy of things to do was more important. But he was involved in the sense that he gave a talk to the new UN, I think it was on the 25th.
Yes, 2 weeks later, yes,
yeah,
Monday or Tuesday.
In front of the entire world damned this video maker and said that we don't, and that man was jailed 2 days later. And yet we know that there was no connection. So when Candy Crawley in the 3rd presidential debate waves her hand and says the president said this was a terrorist act, what he did was he just mentioned that it might be, but then he went right back to the narrative the next day, and he kept with that narrative for 2 weeks, and he must have known that was not true, because he had intelligence from the CIA that said that it was not true.
So you believe that the president participated in the muddling of it. Do you believe he directed the policy to muddle it?
Well, in this sense, I think there had been a Axelrod, David Poop, or whoever they are, there was a narrative that said, this close to election, we are not going to have a big Mogadishu-like shootout that A, nullifies the achievement of killing bin Laden, and B, nullifies the achievement of getting rid of Gaddafi and fostering constitutional government. We have to have those narratives that with bin Laden went Al-Qaeda, and with Gaddafi went a bad Libya. Now we have a good Libya, and we don't have Al-Qaeda. And all of a sudden we've got Al-Qaeda in Libya in a mess, and that was something that was intolerable before the election.
Therefore, what we're looking at is very much like Watergate. You will recall that Mr. Nixon ordered the cover-up to get past the election and mocked the idea afterwards that he was vulnerable. He was extremely vulnerable.
And remember, John, that we knew about Watergate at the end of March 1972.
Right.
And he was reelected. Without that story stayed pretty much quiet for what, 9 months?
No, June of 72 is the Watergate break-in. By October, we knew all the facts. We knew what was happening. We knew who did it. We knew the directions. We couldn't put anybody in jail, but certainly the electorate knew what was happening.
But these things take a long time to gestate. So the fact that everybody forgot Benghazi after the election doesn't mean that it won't become important. Watergate was forgotten for a while too. Third-rate break-in, et cetera, et cetera. So is Iran-Contra. But they tend, if people are not telling the truth, no matter how biased the media, finally that comes out. And in this case, the administration just is not telling the truth.
Do you believe?
I don't know why they don't do it. They could, Obama, Hillary, they could have a press conference. They could have said, you know what? we did not react the way we should have, and we're sorry for that. And that would
Do you believe it could go to a joint committee, Victor?
Absolutely.
A joint committee to hear the facts before the Congress, senators and congressmen like Iran-Contra.
But there's 4 people who are dead, and there's people who know why they died, and they believe that they could have, their deaths could have been prevented, and they were angry about it, and now they're energized, and that's not going to go away.
Has Mr. Obama waited too long to turn this off? Is the process in train?
You know what he has? It's what we've been talking about for the last 4 years. He does really believe that he is insulated from any popular or media criticism. He just believes that. It's been very harmful to him because it allows him to say and do stupid things and feel that he has an exemption, a medieval penance from criticism. But I think in this case, he's very naive because he's not getting out ahead of it. Because he just keeps thinking, you know what, there'll always be a Candy Crawley, there'll always be a Chris Matthews to protect me.
Right.
I don't think there will be in this. This could be if the media sees his popularity go down a little bit and they see his term is ending in lame duck fashion this early, then they'll want to jump in and redeem themselves, because some of these media people are feeling sort of embarrassed that they've been so biased. Benghazi is a chance for them to redeem themselves.
Victor Davis Hanson, writing at the National Review Online. Is Benghazi becoming a Watergate, Iran-Contra, or both? Victor is at the Hoover Institution. I'm John Batchelor.